webinar. I'm so glad that you could join me today. This is great. So today, in the next 45 to 50 minutes or so, I'm going to describe how the AIM, which we call the Accelerative Integrated Methodology, rapidly develops proficiency in a foreign or other language. Just like to begin by asking a couple of questions. And if you want to just practice asking questions in the chat, then if you have any going forward throughout the session, please don't hesitate at all to put your questions in the chat. But for now, what I would like you to do is just write in the chat what it was about AIM that piqued your interest enough to bring you here today. Did you see AIM just find it online, or did you see it in a classroom, or did a colleague tell you about it? And also, if you don't mind, I'd love to know where you are from, what city, and what grades you teach and what language. So just a little bit of information about yourself. Oh, we have one more person coming in here. So yeah, that would be just great if you could add that to the chat box. And I like to also sort of personalize the sessions and speak directly to those who are attending. So that would be great. All right, so how AIM began. So Amelia, I think you just joined. I've just asked the others if they could please write in the chat box.
Hello.
Bonjour. Buenos dias. I just would love it if you could write in the chat box what brought you here today, what piqued your interest to bring you here today, and what grades and what languages and where you are from, what languages you teach. Okay, so I'm going to just get started while you are all writing in that chat box, and make sure you write to everyone so that we can all see it. I am Wendy Maxwell. I'm the creator of the methodology called AIM, the Accelerative Integrated Methodology. And I started out as a French immersion teacher in Canada. I'm not sure if you guys are from Canada. I'll know once you write in the chat box. I'm originally from Ontario, and I taught in Toronto at an inner city school in immersion. And even though the kids had a fairly supportive parent background, but they it wasn't a wealthy school at all, and so you didn't have tutors, didn't have help. But I found that even after a year of immersion, the students were coming along pretty well in French. Then I moved to a very different school, a girls' private school, although there were boys in half my classes. It was co-ed for half the classes. And at that school, the parents were extremely supportive of French. They, would do everything to make sure that their students did well. Yet, when I entered the school, I had students from junior kindergarten to grade 5, and some of the students had 7 years of instruction, 30 minutes every day. I could not believe that the kids in grade 5 who'd had 7 years of instruction at the highest level that I taught there could not speak to me, could not read in French, could not write a sentence, much less a story. And it was just shocking to me. I couldn't speak to them in French, as I'd been doing with my 1 year grade 1 students in French immersion. And so I thought, this is just a travesty. I can't believe it. Is this unique? Surely it's not unique surely, this school is a very good school. These students, many of whom were girls who often do well in languages, were really just not successful. So I didn't know what to do, and it was very frustrating because I'd been used to speaking only in French to my students, and these students couldn't tolerate it. So I looked for a way to change and to get my students proficient as rapidly as possible. And so I tried different things, and I'm going to describe those things that I tried and ended up becoming the methodology that I'm going to share with you today. So Amelia, you're a French teacher and French first and second language teacher. Lovely. And Leah, you heard about AIM and saw it at a table language convention. Oh, that may have been me back then. And you use music and gestures in ESL and French, teach all ages in private school. Okay, in Berkeley, California. Lovely. And Jody, you were assigned Core French next year for the first time and looking for programming. you'd heard about AIM. Lovely. 4-5 split in Ontario. Well, AIM is perfect for that grade. Actually, AIM works so well with many different grades, starting at age 5 and going right up to age 12, and we even have adult kits now. All right, so let's get started, and I will describe what AIM is. So first of all, what I'd like you to do is just to see a little bit of what AIM is in action. So here's a little video with different AIM being taught in the different languages that we have for the methodology. Oh.
Now, everyone will do the song
Ta grand-mère, parce que c'est la grand-mère de chaperon rouge et la mère par chaperon rouge. Alors c'est ta grand-mère.
Du monde est fantastique. La classe toma. Yo tomo.
Una persona importante o importante, entonces yo no hablo con tú, okay.
我要找一个歌手，小鸡住在农场里，一天小鸡出上学，一个小国家在小鸡的头上。怎么了？哎呀，天塌了，天塌了！怎么了？你去哪里？天塌了，天塌吗？
All right, so that just gives you a little bit of an overview of what parts of AIM look like. And of course, what is most obvious is the use of the gesturing by the teacher and the constant speaking by the students. You also saw students just presenting a little play, which we also do as well. It's an arts and literacy based approach. So we do work on in depth with story, theater, drama, music, dance as well. So the main goal, as you probably gathered from the introduction and how I began, the main goal for me of the development of this methodology is to ensure the development of rapid proficiency. I was very frustrated, as I said, with my students' lack or non-existent proficiency. And so it was very important to me to find ways to rapidly accelerate their proficiency, which I love seeing reflected in the guidelines, the ACTFL guidelines, the CEFR guidelines out of Europe, where most of guidelines in the world, upon which most guidelines in the world are now based, like Ontario guidelines are based on the CEFR can-do statements, so are ACTFL, many other provinces in Canada as well, and other countries, of course, in Europe. So what can the students do? What can the students do in terms of language proficiency? What things are they able to say, to communicate, and to make themselves understood? So this is really the goal of the accelerative integrated methodology. It is accelerative because the strategies I use rapidly help students gain an understanding of the language and rapidly begin to produce the language. It's integrated because as a former immersion teacher, I realized the benefits of teaching other subjects or the language through other subject areas. So I would teach math, science, social studies, language arts, everything in French in my immersion class. When it comes to a 30, 40 minute a day or less, or sometimes a little more class, I had to choose one subject. So the subject I chose, which I feel most appropriate for a limited amount of time to teach French or Spanish or Mandarin or Japanese is, or English, of course, is literacy. So AIM is very much a literacy-based approach. We focus on working with story, and as I mentioned earlier, theater, drama. So it's got the arts component, choreography, music, singing, dancing. And so I integrate all of that into this methodology. And it's a very powerful way to engage students, and it's a very powerful way for them to actually acquire the language. It's very engaging. And then it's a methodology. AIM is not a typical program based on certain curriculum guidelines somewhere in the world. It was created as a system to rapidly accelerate language acquisition. You can use one part of this methodology, the gestures. You can use another part, the use of story, in the way I use story and questioning with total and partial questions and other things. But those alone used separately are not nearly as powerful as the way that the methodology works with all its components working synergistically together. That is when AIM is extremely powerful. So I am recommending the implementation of the methodology in full, because there's nothing like the results that you get when AIM is used as a whole. So just in summary, it's a quick start methodology that helps students develop immersion-like proficiency within a fraction of the time. And in fact, most students after 5, 6, 7 years don't develop immersion proficiency. And this is very unfortunate, because so much time and money and energy on the part of the teacher is spent to help students acquire language. AIM isn't tied to a specific curriculum. It is multidisciplinary, as I mentioned. It's based on sound research, brain-based research, in general, the way students learn. And I have a lot of different research studies that I can share with you, studies on AIM itself and other studies that support AIM. Those are all found on our website, and I'm happy to point you to that. If you want to send me an email after, I can give you the link to that. So where is AIM used in the world? Canada, many, many provinces. Most provinces, there are at least a few teachers, but Ontario, throughout Ontario, AIM is used throughout British Columbia and Alberta, Manitoba as well, and other provinces. As I mentioned, many different states in the United States, very widely used in the Netherlands and Australia, and we're almost in every country in the world, but to a much lesser degree than the ones I just mentioned. So started in an independent school, as I mentioned. Many more public schools are now using it than independent schools, because there are so many more public schools. A recent study in the Netherlands, because there are so many teachers using it, there was a university in the north that wanted to do a study, and it was found that AIM students were the best classes in the country, in the 97th to 100th percentile, and in the longitudinal study that was done, the AIM classes outperform students in other programs, the other two most popular programs, French programs, in all language skills. In the United States, students in Virginia and Nevada have been winning national competitions, the National French Contest. And of course, AIM is used, as I mentioned, in other states as well. Okay, what are the key components of this methodology? Well, there's the use of the gesture approach, which you probably notice is the most visible aspect of this methodology. You walk into an AIM classroom, the teacher is gesturing, the students are speaking. So the way we help students rapidly acquire language is this teacher introduces a gesture associated with a sound. So for example, I could say ni hao, and you wouldn't understand, if you don't understand Mandarin, you wouldn't understand what I'm saying. I could say buenos dias. If you don't understand Spanish, you wouldn't understand what I'm saying. Again, an arbitrary sound. I could say bonjour. If you don't understand French, you wouldn't understand what that means. And I could say hello. If you didn't understand English, you wouldn't understand what that means. They're all arbitrary sounds that humans developed for their language. But once I say ni hao or bonjour, then suddenly the students are getting an association of meaning to sound. And so every single word in the pared down language, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about, has an associated gesture. And it's not only the words, but we also have various aspects of grammar. So students are physically and visually seeing grammar and syntax represented. So we'll see examples of the gesture approach, but the most important component is that the teacher is allowed to pass directly, or is not allowed, is able to pass directly to meaning, helping the students rapidly understand what those sounds mean. And then no longer does the teacher talk, once he or she has introduced the gesture, the students do the talking. So this raises the level of opportunity for production from, studies have shown, 1 to 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes per student in a class for language production, to 30 minutes out of a 30-minute class, or 29 minutes. The students are speaking almost all the time. Their accent develops well, their confidence develops well, their proficiency develops well, because they're just practicing speaking the language even when they're nonverbal. So next one, high frequency vocabulary. Very important aspect of the aim to help students rapidly develop language. We have dictionaries this thick of our languages. What vocabulary do we choose? Well, it's very important what we choose, because I found that the thematic approaches I was using were not teaching the right vocabulary. They were teaching lists of nouns, lists of fruits and vegetables, lists of clothing, and lists of sports, or lists of other hobbies and things. These are many, many nouns. And the students could, of course, list, for example, objects in the classroom. They could list them, but they couldn't say anything about them. They could say chaise, table, porte, plancher, crayon, livre. Well, that's not helpful in forming a sentence. They need to say, est-ce que je peux avoir le livre qui est sur le plancher? You know, they need the question, they need the verb, they need the subject. So they weren't learning what they needed to know. And they also needed to know how to put the words together to create a sentence. So this is what AIM is all about, to help students learn to do that. So the pared down language is based on scope, reliability, and frequency. Words with frequency, high frequency. We don't need lists of fruits and vegetables, or lists of insects, or lists of other things that aren't necessarily going to be ever used in the classroom. They need a lot of verbs. Pared down language is extremely verb centered. And I don't think I'll get into it right now, but I regularize the stem of the verbs to make it so that it's very simple for students to acquire verbs. We don't need to worry about conjugation. For in French, for example, I don't use nous and vous, I use on, tout le monde, or la classe, so that they are able to exclusively use that regularized stem of veut, or va, or doit, or peut, or c'est, or prend, or done, and so on. Lots of question words are very much part of the pared down language. Lots of linking words, avec, pour, quand, and other words, all the question words, as I mentioned. So the pared down language is a very effective component of this methodology to ensure that students are acquiring the words they need for beginning proficiency and developing that foundation of proficiency, because only once you develop that foundation can you actually build on it. And students spend 5-6 years in language never building that foundation. Scope, words with broadest scope of applicability. Instead of teaching in French, well, I'll say the words in English because I'm not too sure. I think you, you all teach French, I think, do you? Okay, let me just confirm here. I'm gonna look at the chat. Okay, here we go. Yes, okay, French. So, so instead of teaching lac, rivière, fleuve, océan, mer, I just teach l'eau to start with, because you can refer to all those things and use that word that has a broad scope of applicability. So that's something we keep in mind. A lot of cognates as well. And reliability. Well, since you're all teaching French, I should have, for some reason, I thought there were other languages, but as I mentioned, I teach the regularized stem, veut, or va, or aime, or doit, and so on. So, and I use exclusively the je, tu, il, elle, on, la classe, and tout le monde instead of the nous and vous. Eliminate that for a little while. Now the students can speak perfect French without error using that regularized stem and using those subjects. Later on, of course, we use introduce nous and vous after students are a bit proficient, and it slips in really easily. Il and elle, plural, are often the same. Il regarde, plural, elle regarde, plural, and so on. It's usually the same in oral form. Now, how do we contextualize this important vocabulary? And it's very important to contextualize it in a way that's engaging. As I mentioned earlier, we use the literacy and arts-based approach. So I'm going to show you some videos of how we do that, but basically we take one story, and this is based on David Booth's notion of going in, out, and around the story. He was a literacy expert who spoke to teachers all over the world about his perspective on the best literacy approach in first language. Well, I think this applies even more so in second language. Even more so, do students need the comfort of that one story? And so we take a 50-hour unit and we work with that one story over 50 hours of instruction. It's not all we do. We do lots of other things, games and things, but often they relate to the story. So the students have this sense of security and predictability. We recycle the same vocabulary over and over again so they have enough pleasant repetition, what we call pleasant repetition, to ensure they can acquire the words. Now, taking that story, because we have this story that they work on for so long, this gives us the most wonderful opportunity to now, with confidence, help students to gain an ability to manipulate the language on their own. It is absolutely astounding how working on one story and students learning the story really well allows them to confidently start to manipulate the language. Simple language manipulation activities like switching out a word in a sentence, moving into questions, total questions where the answer is contained in the question, partial questions where it's not contained in the question, the answer is not contained in the question. And then moving out into story retelling and then story extension activities where they're actually writing up to 10-page stories even before the end of the 50-hour kit. Now we want students from the very first lesson to begin to transfer to spontaneous communication. Not written yet, of course. We always focus on the oral first, get that set up and students up and running. But the transfer has to happen really early. So let's have a look at the gesture approach here. This is going to be a classroom. Well, you can tell me what you think about this classroom.
Aujourd'hui, je suis très excitée parce que la semaine prochaine, je vais visiter mon ami qui habite à Winnipeg. C'est vrai, je suis née à Winnipeg et toute ma famille habite à Winnipeg. J'ai 2 sœurs et j'ai ma maman et mon papa qui habitent là. Alors, ma maman est tellement contente.
Okay, so you can turn on your microphones if you like. We're just a small group. Anything you see there about that classroom that shows that the French teacher is doing well? Any comments?
Yeah, I mean, you feel like she's talking to them and you have no idea if they're understanding anything. So there's no interaction.
True. We don't know if they're understanding anything. Anything that's good about what you might see there? I mean, she's using French. I walk into French classrooms sometimes and the teacher's not speaking French. They're speaking in English. So at the very least, she's using the target language only. That's great.
Pared down vocabulary, maybe simple, contente, sœur, frère, frequency words.
She is. Okay. She is a name teacher. She's not using AIM there, but she's a name teacher and she is using the pared down language. Yes, indeed. And then also, of course, the students are sitting, paying attention. And as you said, Leah, we don't know if they're understanding. So that's, a bit of a, we don't know. So now we'll see the same teacher teaching the class with AIM.
Habite à Winnipeg.
Pardon?
Winnipeg.
Excellent.
Alors, je vais
Continuer.
maintenant. Est-ce que tout le monde sait ou ne sait pas que je suis né à Winnipeg? Je sais. C'est vrai. Je suis né là-bas. Et j'ai aussi des amis que je peux visiter là-bas aussi.
Okay, so I think you got the impression, you got the idea. The teacher gestures. We do not hear the teacher's voice above that of the students. The students' voices must be louder. The teacher can silently whisper along, or the teacher can speak along, as long as her or his voice is not above that of the students. We must hear the students' voices. The teacher, when an error happens, when a misidentification of a gesture, j'ai, she just keeps repeating. She doesn't need to single anyone out. She just repeats until they say it well, properly. So there's a lot of that ongoing adjustment of language. And she's sharing something about herself, which is really nice to see. And that's very much part of the methodology, where the teacher is, of course, not just talking about the story that we're working on, but using the gestures in an authentic way to have the students learn more about the teacher, but also to practice expressing about who we are and what we're doing and what we enjoy and so on.
What
Okay.
is Claire doing? She is going over there to look for a pencil for me. Where is the pencil? The pencil is on the table. It is in a box. Here is a pencil. Thank you, Claire. You are very, very nice. Now we are ready to do the questions and the answers.
Okay, so that is an example of what you might see in an ESL classroom. Not much different from the French. It's actually exactly the same. Whatever language we're using, we're implementing this methodology with the strategies, the techniques, the stories, even the content of the activities, they're all the same. The only difference is that the gestures are slightly different across languages, of course, because languages have their particularities. In this case, this wasn't the teacher talking about herself and what she's going to do on the weekend. This was the teacher having the class practice expressing a request. So I want the student to stand up. I need a pencil. Go over there. Take the pencil. Give me the pencil. Thank you. And so it's all about, again, social interactions, practicing authentic interactions with using gestures to help students speak and not the teacher. So I talked a bit about the pared down language. I don't know if you have any other questions with respect to that. It is a very important component of this methodology. It threads throughout every aspect of it. The pared down language comes into the stories. The pared down language is again repeated, of course, in all of the language manipulation activities. The teacher is consciously incorporating the pared down language that isn't included in the story in his or her gesturing for students to speak, as you saw in the last activities. And yeah, in the games and songs as well, the same pared down language is revisited by the students over and over and over again. So I love this quote by the researcher and speaker on literacy called David Booth. He really expresses well what we do in AIM. Children new to a language, or students of any age, new to a language find in a story context for understanding. It's not word lists that command their attention, but the lives of characters that fill the tales they read or listen to. And how painful it must be for those students alien to a language to sit day after day without feeling connected to what is happening in the classroom. And yet, through storying, how quickly they enter the activity, making sense of what is happening, building their own versions, listening, telling, retelling, talking about, reflecting upon, and responding. This is really what we do. And I cannot say that I have ever seen as much engagement when we are using a story as the basis. It just is a wonderful, security-provoking, predictable environment that you can provide that is usually very anxiety-provoking and just very difficult for students who are distractible or those who are weaker, who don't understand. Those students are supported because they come into the classroom, we're repeating things over and over again. They're gaining that confidence through the repetition. And the ones who are really bright, oh my goodness, do they ever take off? They learn so rapidly. So a lot of those things, the retelling and the responding to questions, talking about building their own versions of the story, extending the stories, are many things that we do. So let's have a look here at a French play, since you're all in French.
Le guépard arrive à la maison du lion. Il parle avec lui. Monsieur Lion, qu'est-ce qu'on fait? Il ne pleut pas depuis longtemps. Tout le monde a très soif. C'est un gros problème. Est-ce que tu peux nous aider? D'accord, guépard. Tu dois aller à l'arbre Ungali, un arbre magique qui est loin d'ici dans la forêt. Tu dois dire le nom de l'arbre et après ça, l'arbre peut aider les animaux. Dis à l'arbre que tout le monde a soif parce qu'il n'y a pas d'eau. N'oublie pas, c'est l'arbre Ungali. Oh, merci, Monsieur Lion. Merci. Je cours à l'arbre maintenant. Au revoir.
Okay, so this is just very one short component, one short scene of a play that would take usually 10, 12 to 13 minutes probably to present. The AIM stories are not short, stilted dialogues. They're full-length literacy pieces that where students can learn about how to develop a good story, add to a story, learn how to add detail, what makes a good story, how to sequence stories, and so, and all in the second language. So we're demanding a lot of the students, but we do so in a very careful, methodical, scaffolded way so that they are always supported and successful. So this is an African folk tale and one of the stories in the Step 3 kit. Okay, so we also have songs and raps, as I mentioned, so we'll have a look.
La classe commence et tout le monde est prêt. On doit parler seulement en français. Mais si quelqu'un parle en anglais, cette personne n'a pas de carte et ça c'est vrai. Ça c'est dommage, mais on espère aussi que tout le monde décide d'aider ses amis. En français, on parle tellement bien. Notre rap est terminé, oui c'est la fin.
Okay, I'll stop there. Basically, you noticed in the rap, this is a rap that discusses our expectations of the students as class begins, so rap d'entrée. So we want students to acknowledge that they're going to use the target language only, commit to that. We talk about our card system. I mean, I'm teaching online right now and I have to use points. I can't really hand my kids cards, but in class we have the card system, we have the group point system, we have a lot of systems where students have to take responsibility and be accountable for the use of the target language only. And it's extremely important. I see, because sometimes I don't use the card or point system right off the bat, and I see a rapid shift as soon as I introduce the card system or the group point system within the first few weeks of the implementation of the methodology in the first kit. The shift in students' awareness and efforts to use the target language only. Here's a song that we always have songs, at least one, based on as a retelling of the play, the story that we're working with. Okay, so that's just a very short excerpt. We have the students show the choreography on video, and then they learn the words as well. And so the students in your class can dance along with you with the video and practice the dance for their final performance, either on video or to another class, or in an assembly. Okay, because there is an end of unit culminating event where after various play rehearsals and song and dance rehearsals throughout, there is an obvious benefit to having students present their stories to others and take pride in that accomplishment, because there's a lot of cooperative learning involved in AIM where students are working together. One of the things they do is rehearse their story. The whole class practices the song and dance together. And then, of course, we do a lot of, the students are always working in partners when they're writing as well. So this is just a quote from someone who uses AIM for ESL at the Southern New Hampshire University, and he uses AIM with our adult ESL kit.
If I had to choose, one thing that distinguishes AIM classrooms from more typical core French classrooms, it's the level of emotional investment that kids have in the process and the fun that they're having. And again, that's fuel that drives the learning process.
So they're very keen and they can apply. I guess the most remarkable point is that they can apply everything or a lot of what they've learned in a context, in everyday life context.
What we didn't anticipate would happen was that students in grade 4 with a sibling that it was in grade 7 were going home at night and actually speaking French in sentences at the dinner table. And the feedback was very impressive from the parents that all of a sudden their kids were having conversations that they couldn't follow in French at the dinner table. And we didn't realize that what we would be doing was creating a linguistic community, because one of the problem.
Well, just stop there. Yeah, so just a few of those who have witnessed AIM or have implemented AIM. Now, one of the things that observers of the methodology often say is, well, for example, we have Les Trois Petits Cochons is a very popular step 1 kit. Students and teachers know the story, it's predictable, and it's just fun. It's sort of done in a more modern, fun way. So it's a very popular kit. So teachers or observers might say, have said, well, okay, the kids are doing this Three Little Pigs play. Are they only going to be talking about pigs? Well, of course not. That is not the case. That is not the goal of AIM, to only be able to speak about the characters or about the story itself. That is the what is the word? Well, the story is the anchor, but it's also the method through which we help students to learn to speak authentically in French. And I've shown you other videos that, of course, illustrate how we help students practice the language far outside of the play with no reference to the story. And we do a lot of that. So, the story is very helpful, as I mentioned before, in giving students that sense of security and ability to practice important words like peut and doit and veut and je veux and est-ce que je peux and qui fait ça, or whatever it might be, within the context of the story, because they know it so well. The answers just flow so easily. So here we'll have a look at some students. After 100 hours of AIM instruction, we ask them to just talk about anything.
Engali est très fantastique.
Oui. Toi toute seule maintenant. Et tout le monde avec Melissa. Oui. J'ai oublié son nom.
J'aime qui est peu de mes chansons.
Est-ce que tu peux chanter ça maintenant?
Je chante très bien.
Oh, oui. Est-ce que tu peux chanter maintenant?
Non.
Parce que tu es très oh oui.
Il y a 5 personnes dans ma famille, mais je pense que mon frère est un animal.
Okay, well, as long as they're complaining about their siblings in French, I guess it's okay. In the other little portion of the video, it was nice to see that where the boy forgot his words. He knows he can't use English, and he was going, because parce que tu es embarrassé. Well, he didn't have that word. It's not part of the beginning pared down language, but the girl next to him was helpful and gave him the word parce que tu as peur, which is, of course, in the step 1 kit. So, all right. So we spent a lot of time, I've spent a lot of time showing you how AIM develops oral language proficiency. We don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to assure you that AIM equally focuses on written language proficiency. Oral language proficiency, however, in a foreign language classroom is often more difficult, more challenging for students to acquire. We just don't see it developing as well. So, however, because students are developing such wonderful oral language proficiency, and if they are English language speakers sharing the same alphabet, of course, the transfer to the written is very simple, very straightforward, and just rapidly happens.
Oui. Il faut te mettre en sac et déchirer.
Est-ce que ça, c'est la même histoire, mais dans les mots différents?
Oui.
Dans les mots différents?
Qu'est-ce qu'on peut
Mais
faire?
est-ce que tu fais en partenaire ou saute? Beaucoup. Est-ce que tu fais
Et très pauvre.
Est-ce que tu fais ça?
Est-ce que c'est sans? Non, ça c'est juste.
Tu fais ça?
Lui commence à marcher dans la forêt. Il espère trouver une amie dans la forêt. Elle a demandé
En train de... Oh, excellent. En train de... En 3 mots. En train de...
Après, il a triché avec un accent aigu. La petite chaperon rouge est partie le plus vite possible chez la grand-mère de chaperon rouge. Oui, est-ce que tu es a dit, alors qu'est-ce qu'elle a dit? Elle a dit, la grand-mère, d'accord.
Okay, so what the students are doing here is what you typically see. AIM classrooms are fairly loud because the students are always talking during partner group activity time. On average, we have 2/3 of the class, whole class activities where we're working with students as a whole class, gesturing for them to speak, modeling activities, practicing the play, asking questions on the story, doing games, doing raps, other activities, modeling the story, retelling, story extension. And then 1/3 of the class, the students are working in partners or groups of 3 if it's necessary, because it's an odd number of students, working mostly in partners to write stories, answer questions based on the story, or do other activities. So that is where they apply their language. And both parts of the class are extremely important. They have different roles. So this is what you saw here is called partner group activities, where students are interacting only in the target language and just discussing stories that they're writing. We don't have a lot of time. Well, let's have a look at one of these raps that a group of students wrote.
Aujourd'hui, la classe commence et tout le monde danse. Quand j'entre dans la classe française, je ne parle pas en anglais. On parle en français, c'est fantastique. La Bengalie a bien appris. Je parle en français, c'est très bien. Je fais les actions avec mes mains. En anglais, ça c'est vrai. Mot.
Okay, so it's lovely to see this actually. These are inner city students, transient school. They're proud of what they've done. They've done a simple little rap based on the template of our rap d'entrée, which I showed earlier. This teacher would have modeled how to create a rap, working with rhyming words, using the pared down language, and then develop one as a class. And then we send the students off after we've done the modeling to write in partners a rap of their own. And then they filmed it. So very proud and wonderful to see grade 8 boys having fun with French. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the stories that we do. So the first story that we embark upon for students and we model extensively, there is a huge modeling component in AIM to ensure that students are ready to do the activity with a partner independently, not copying the story we did, independently. So the first story that we do is a retelling. This develops circumlocution and awareness of storying and awareness of sequencing and awareness of adding details sometimes as we move forward. How to embellish a story, how to improve upon a story, what makes a good story. So in this first story, this is one of my grade 1 students. we did Le Chat et la Lune, which is a step 1 story. And she retold the story. And what they have to do is not repeat any sentence from the original story. They have to rewrite the story, rewriting in a new sentence, new sentences, exactly the same story. They can't change the story, but they have to make their own sentences. And they can add details too that weren't included. Like, what color was this? What was the character thinking? What did the character has a bag on her back? What did she put in the back? And so on. So, I mean, this is lovely to see from 30 minutes a day of French, core French student in Ontario writing this in her very first year of French. Now we'll move up to grade 11 in Spanish. It's exactly the same thing, and it's exactly the same if it were English. Student is writing a story retelling in his or her, I think it's her, own words. This one is much longer, much more accurate, much more detailed. It's a grade 11 student, not grade 1. Now, this is something I'm really impressed with. In Australia, teachers teach Japanese with AIM. And even after just 80 hours of instruction, we see the students able to write. This is much more difficult, of course, in a category 4 language with a different script. So they've learned it as well. So it's not quite as long as the French or Spanish ones, but very impressive. Now we're back down to step 3, 75 hours of instruction. Grade 7. And again, it's much longer than grade 1, much more detailed than grade 1, much more accurate, fewer errors, and so on. Again, all of those were the end of the first year of French or the very beginning of the second year of French, or Spanish, or Japanese, as we saw in the other. This one now is a story extension. Now that's what we do after we've completed our retelling. We work on extensions. Qu'est-ce qui se passe après? So this was one of my students, well, 2 students, who wrote the story, and I would like to have your comments about this one. I'll read it to you because sometimes it's a little difficult. At the end of Les Trois Petits Cochons, the wolf leaves and he's not happy, he's still hungry, of course. Excuse me. Après que le loup sort de Les Trois Petits Cochons, il va à la maison et dort et se réveille et marche à la blase. Et court et marche. Monsieur Loup est très fou et content. Et le loup frappe à la porte de la fille amie. Il dit à son ami, est-ce que tu veux danser avec moi? Oui, je veux, je aime toi. L'ami dit, est-ce que tu veux aller à ma maison? Le loup dit, oui, oui, je veux. Le cochon est ici, dit le loup. He's not afraid of the pig because he fell in its soup. J'ai peur, dit la fille amie. Cours à sa maison. Oui, je veux aller à ma maison. Est-ce que tu veux aller à ma maison? Oui, je veux aller à ta maison. Dit le loup. Je veux faire une fête, dit la fille amie. Le loup dit oui, 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 oui. Je veux manger avec toi. Dit le loup. Oui, oui, oui. Dit la fille amie. Je veux. Lots of repetition, you can see. Pleasant repetition embedded in their minds. Je veux manger maintenant. Je veux, dit le loup. Tu vas à l'arbre et mange? Oui, je vais à l'arbre et mange. Et mange. Le loup, il va à l'arbre et mange. Ça, c'est délicieux. I'll finish there, I think, with that lovely word, délicieux. Anyway, it goes on a little bit, which is lovely to see. Any comments about that? You can turn on your microphones or you can write in the chat box. Any comments about that story by that grade 1 student, grade 1 French, about probably 80 to 100 hours of instruction. Writing that story. Anything at all that you notice about that story? Okay, I have a question. Could that student have written that story if the student, oh, you're writing it there, you think they're writing it there first? Oh, well, what happens there is that student probably indeed does write an inventive spelling in their first language, in English. They probably know more sight words, more words, so it's more accurate, probably, but there's a lot of inventive spelling that happens across languages. If they are a good speller, like that first one I showed you, she actually didn't have a lot of inventive spelling, but Leah, you're absolutely right. This is filled with inventive spelling. So What does that tell you about the student's ability to speak? Does that tell you anything at all? Would this student be able to write this in grade 1 if she could not speak? Use those same words orally. Any thoughts on that? Would we see a grade 1 student writing like that if he or she could not speak and say those words orally? The answer is no. The student, I feel it would be impossible. Young students work with their oral a lot. So unless the student is able to say those words in grade 1, they are not going to be able to use inventive spelling and write out those words. So the student, exactly, Jody. Yeah, the student is able to say those words easily in the language and then would put them down on paper. So a few more things that we do. We also ask students, especially older ones very early and younger ones a little later as they move along, to read stories outside of the play, the main story of the kit. We include some of these stories in the kits themselves, and we have activities based around them. We also have digital library packs, or of course you're free to use other stories that you feel are important. Choose them wisely so that you know that your students will be able to read them fairly easily. It's always great to have them exposed to having to learn new words in context that are not part of the pared down language. And then we ask students to do a little report and also to do a retelling of the story that they read. Because they're familiar with the process, they do a retelling of the story. This was a lovely creative activity that one teacher from Missouri, who is doing the second kit now in grade 8 of the high school series, and he had the students not do an extension, but actually a precursor to the story. What happens? Qu'est-ce qui se passe avant? So this student wrote 1,000 words. And usually we find that when I model with the kids the story, I usually write 10 chart paper pages, which works out to 1,000 words. Okay, I think I'm going to pause here because we're really almost done. I do have a little more information on grammar here, but I'm sure I've overwhelmed you with information. Is there anything that you would have any questions at all before I just quickly show you how you might implement the methodology? I want to be sure any of your questions are answered. It's pretty fast to just turn on your microphone and just ask the question if you have.
I have a question. I'm just wondering, I guess I'm on a maternity leave right now, and I'm going to be going back in January. So the teacher before me, I have no idea how they will be teaching French, what they will be doing. And also all the classes that I teach are 4 or 5 splits. So I guess just in terms of like teaching split grades, how does that work? And then also, so I'll likely see the same groups of students, like the grade 4s, I'll have them again in grade 5. And then also just starting in January, like how can I manage that? Or what do you think that would look like?
Yeah, when you start AIM, the kids know no different. In fact, teachers who have been doing something else and then decide to start mid-year, they often find that a little funny. But I say, look, the kids don't know you weren't intending to do this all the time. And suddenly they're going to start learning really well. You're a completely different teacher. So that's to be expected that you would do your own thing. So absolutely, teachers begin AIM at any time. I do recommend that you allow yourself the time to complete a full kit. And that can only happen if you start in September or at the latest by the end of January. So as long as you can start September to January or end of January to June, that is perfect. It gives you enough time, especially in Ontario with 40 minutes a day, plenty of time to complete a 50-hour kit. You actually have more than 50 hours with your students.
Okay.
In terms of split grades, it's absolutely possible to do that. You would not ever do 2 different plays. You want the whole class to be cohesive. When you work with the whole class, you're working on the same things. They're always working together. I can pretty much guarantee if they haven't done AIM, the 4s are no different from 5s in their proficiency level. They're really, from everything I've seen. So if they've done AIM, that's a whole other issue, and I can help you with that. If they haven't done AIM and you're starting fresh, I would start with 4 or 5, absolutely, with Les Trois Petits Cochons. It's a story that the kids at that age love. It's predictable. It's the most popular of all the plays in the elementary series, or one of the most popular. So you can do that with your both classes. Now the next year, when you have grade 4, you could look to doing, for example, the simpler step 1 kit, which is Le Chat et la Lune. And then the grade 5s can move to the second kit, or 5, 6 if it's split, I'm not sure, the second step kit from in the fall, which is called Comment y aller. So I can help guide you. We have lots of different options at the same step levels. We have 3 step 1 kits, 3 step 2 kits, 3 step 3 kits. So we can mix and match as you move through those combined classes to make sure you're not repeating. But still,
Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
you're very welcome. Okay, so I'll just continue on with the last little bit. In case you have any other questions, just make sure you turn on the microphone and ask. So in order to implement AIM, we have our kits that I was talking to, I think it was Jody. I think so, yes. So the AIM resources come in a kit. We have a program guide that's an overview. We have teacher's guides, which we also call whole class activities. These are all of the numbered teacher-led activities that will guide you and train you in the methodology, really in-depth, show you exactly how I would use this with my students, the flow of a kit, when to introduce different activities. There's a whole 85 lesson plan with entry routines, leaving routines, when to do these whole class activities, when to do partner group activities, all very clearly laid out. We have student books, but most teachers just use the partner group activities book, Blackline Master. They photocopy the activities for their students, but you can get digital student books. Lots of teachers bought the digital student books these days with the hybrid and online in class, online in class work. So we have that if you're a one-to-one classroom and in the classroom or not in the classroom, digital workbooks and the hard copy workbooks as well. These have all of the activities that the students will complete in partner group activity time. For the little ones, we have hard copy big books. For the older ones, for everyone, we have the big book as an e-reader read aloud with highlighted text on the portal that you can project. I'll mention the portal in a moment. We have posters and image cards, both hard copy and on our portable. They're projectable. We have assessment activities books for the students who are in the elementary and high school kits. We have separate assessment books that are like DELF tests if you want overall proficiency tests. And the portal. So that's a major component now of every kit. You have access to all of the digital materials there. You have all the songs, raps, dances, the play, all the gestures on video. You have the e-reader of the story, as I mentioned, read aloud with highlighted text. And you have all the audio. You have the posters and the songs with the audio instrumental version only, plus vocals as well as an option, of course. Now, in addition, you have training videos called Des Classes en Action with various different areas upon which I focus to describe aspects of the methodology and how to implement it. And then the students also get access to this. So I find this wonderful as I'm teaching online, and I only teach for 2 hours a week, 2 1-hour, well, it's not even 1 hour, 2 classes a week. In between times, the students are watching the portal, reviewing the story, having it read out loud to them, watching the gestures or practicing songs and dances. So they're enjoying it and supporting you in between classes if you want them to have it. And of course, also on the portal is the digital workbook. So you can have students working online on their digital workbook if they're working on Chromebooks in the classroom, or if you have them working at home, you can correct remotely all of their work. You can see what they've done. You can go in and make comments. And yeah, so that's very easy. Oh dear, I've got a train going by here. We have correlations with ministry guidelines, and training is absolutely essential to the implementation of the methodology. I'm happy to announce that we have our virtual Summer Institute this August, where we have beginner entry-level training for AIM. We have Up Your Game Next Steps training for AIM French teachers. We have training for French teachers, Spanish teachers, French immersion teachers, specialty training, and then we have a 5-day training session at the very end of the week. So those trainings are all 2 days. And then at the very end of the week, we have a 1-day, 5 session specialty webinars on the Friday. So our Summer Institute will be a lot of fun, a lot of variety, really specific workshops for different teachers who are interested in different aspects or different languages. And so that's about it for today. I'm not sure if anyone has any more questions. We've gone past 5 o'clock already, or 5 p.m. BC time. If you don't have any more questions, please don't hesitate to email me, wendy@aimlanguagelearning.com. Or you can also email Laura, whose email you have, or Kathy P@aimlanguagelearning.com. You may have been in touch with her as well. So either me or Laura or Kathy would be happy to assist you, to answer your questions. Yeah, so I do hope to
Can I just ask a quick question? Is it typically like the teachers kind of fund their training and their resources out of pocket, or do you find that a lot of principals will invest? Or
a lot of principals will invest.
Okay, just thinking about how to approach.
Yeah, if you advocate for yourself well, and tell the principal how passionate you are about this methodology, that you're very interested in implementing and you've heard about it, I'm happy to provide any types of resources, studies or testimonials. I've got thousands of them, well, hundreds at least, testimonials to support. Showing a principal will usually respond very favorably to a teacher who is really passionate about implementing a methodology that he or she feels is going to be great for the kids. Great, the parents will appreciate. The administration is going to appreciate it, because the better a teacher does with her students, the more a teacher loves what he or she is doing, the happier the principal is going to be. So I would suggest advocating first with your principal. If that doesn't work, and it usually does, then often your consultant, if you have one, will purchase it out of the consultant funds. And again, advocating for this, usually often the consultant has heard about AIM and hopefully supports it. And then finally, if teacher really wants to implement it and doesn't find that the teacher, someone else supports, then particularly for training, you can go to your what's the word for it? Your Teachers Federation, and they have usually lots of unused funds for workshops or training or professional development teachers don't ever use. So that's another resource. I mean, in BC, all BC teachers can come to AIM for free. They're paying for, well, up to 50 teachers, which is a lot, to come to our Summer Institute. Lots of federations and other public funds are available for training in particular. Not often as much for resources, and that's usually paid for by the teacher, his or herself, by the administrator, or by the consultant.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Any other questions? Okay, well, I hope this was of use to you and that you found it interesting. I would love to see you all at the Summer Institute. That would be fantastic. Kathy will be able to help you with any, we're having a 15% off sale right now on our kits, which is very rare. So if you would like to get a kit, this is a very good time. You can bundle it with your training as well. And Kathy will be able to help you with that. So you can contact Laura. Also, you have Laura's email. She can also help. So thanks very much for joining today. I really appreciate the time you spent with me, over an hour now. And hope to see you someday. Au revoir. Merci tout le monde.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks so much.